The thing I don't understand, at least locally, is I feel like the commercial rates never come down to deal with it. Like, there's so many spaces that'll just sit empty for years and years and years. And I'm like, at some point,
to sit those suckers empty.
I'm like, what do you just offset it with the residential rents then? Like, you just suck the living lights of them. Like, it's like, I don't get it.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.
Welcome to the Master Keys podcast, sponsored by Goldfish cheddar cheese
and a tube of nuts
and gas station barbecue nuts. Apparently, we didn't have breakfast today. Is that a fair? I didn't have breakfast today.
I don't eat breakfast normally, but I just ate a package of birthday cake pretzels out of our administrator's office, so that was good.
Shout out to Girl Guide Cookies.
Sleeve and Girl Guide Cookies. Ooh. Breakfast of champions.
This is their time of year right now. If you're listening out there and you know what I'm saying, I think you do.
You know, you just struck a nerve with me here. So
I just love how inflation has not affected their pricing, apparently.
So I was a scout.
Were you? Boy Scout.
Boy Scout.
Boy Scout Neal.
This is where I learned all my good skills. So I can start a fire with 2 toothpicks. Now, besides the point, it was such a sham because we would do cool shit, man. We would go on some big trips, like different parts of the world, 2-week backpacking, stuff like that, right? We needed to fundraise money to do that. Scouts provided us with popcorn.
Okay.
Overpriced popcorn.
Okay.
And I'd be going door to door.
Selling that popcorn. Yeah.
Trying to hustle popcorn.
In my day, it was like we had to sell apples or something.
Yeah, and apples, dude. Yeah, and I used to stand at Walmart and hustle apples. Yeah. And nobody wants either of those things.
No.
Like it was, and they're like, get off my doorstep. Like, what the hell? Then there's the Girl Guides.
They get cookies.
And also, the other thing, Scouts, a bunch of like teenage, like young.
Pimply face.
Yeah, pimply face, covered in mud.
What about some popcorn?
Smell terrible. Just like you're the worst salesperson to be out there. And then there's the Girl Guides.
And there's like a 45-year-old man in short cargo shorts. That
runs the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, I just do it for the kids.
I'm going to tell you a crazy story after this, but go on.
Anyways, and then there's the Girl Guides. And you have all of them. It's like everyone way more affectionate to little girls. There's like, oh, they're so cute. They're so nice. And they're all shy and shit. And they're carrying around boxes of chocolate cookies that you would buy anyways. You were going to buy a box on the way home because you're stressed out from work and tired.
The pricing is unbelievably good. It's like $5 a box.
I mean, Oreos are $2.99 for a box. Let's just put that out there.
I don't know what it was, but like
it is. It was $6. It was $6 for a box. But still, and they would make so much money. I remember we'd watch them. They'd sell out in like 5 minutes. People would be like fighting for the boxes, and the money would pile up. And then that's how I got into real estate as a scout. I couldn't put together the money for our camping trips, and so I had to get into real estate.
That is wild. So. Anyways. I did Beavers. I didn't carry on to Boy Scouts. I did Beavers. And my dad at the time owned a computer company on Quinpool Road.
How are you telling me about
It was called Minicomp Systems Limited. And this would have been in like the late 80s, early 90s. And his number one product, like what he was kind of pushing, was the Commodore 64.
Beauty.
Which was, for those of you who aren't ancient, like that was a computer startup. Like there was Macintosh. There was, essentially what would become Microsoft personal computers.
Yep.
And then there was Commodore 64. I remember I had like the Double Dragons on the 5.5-inch floppy. It was sick. And Blades of Steel. Anyway, so my father sold this company. I remember one day he came home and he's like, I sold the business. And I actually feel like I occasionally have premonitions. This is going to sound weird. This is a big digression here, but I get premonitions. Little things like, even as a kid, I'd be like, I think mail is going to come from me, and I'd get mail. Anyway, neither here nor there. I occasionally get premonitions.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't care about that business at all, right? Like, whatever. Me and my dad, to be honest, like we weren't even especially close at that time. But when he came home and he said he sold the business, I cried.
Okay.
I cried. Fast forward, the person who bought the business, essentially, we talked about this a little bit. When you buy businesses, predominantly the seller holds paper, right? And finances the property, and there's a slow takeover.
Yep.
My dad got conned out of the business, for lack of a better term, whether totally intentionally or inadvertently. This person took ownership of the business, liquidated all the assets, sold all the inventory, and then either filed for bankruptcy or just dipped. And so my dad got nothing except his entire business was lost. And it led to kind of like some rough times for our family. This was the early 90s recession era, the last major recession that people of my generation or even my parents' generation really kind of think of. So it was tough for a long time. But my mother, very, very sweet person. She was in the grocery store one day and she runs into my former Beavers instructor.
Okay.
One of the guys that instructed my beavers. Hard ass dude. He was like, I think it was
trying to make your beavers clan sound hard.
His father was like escaped like a Nazi prison camp. Like dude was, so his father was a hard ass man. He was a hard ass man. Whatever, something like this. I remember my mom telling me this story is crazy. And my mom, he's like, "How's it going, Susan? How are things with the family?" And my mom tells the story, and he's like, "That's horrible." She's like, "Yeah, what can you do? There's nothing we can do about it." And he goes, "Yes, there is. It's $400 for one leg, $700 for two. Dead serious. Dead serious."
You still have contact with this guy?
In that time, that would have been pretty expensive, in fairness, but don't still have contact with him. But yeah, he offered to break this guy's legs for my mother, who's a very mild-mannered woman, in the grocery store. And he was my beavers instructor. So he was about that life, apparently. He was I think the beavers in hindsight might have been community service. But yeah, that always stuck with me.
I respect that guy. You need to find his contact.
Yeah. Anyway, shout out Commodore 64, shout out beavers, shout out broken
shout
legs.
out beavers. All right. So we didn't come on here today to tell you guys a bunch of stories and our gripes about Boy Scouts. We came on to talk about why immigration is extremely important. And a bunch of you are probably already rolling your eyeballs being like, I clicked on this headline reluctantly because I already knew the answer. And you probably do. But I think there's some more nuance to it that might be getting overlooked that we're going to try and go into.
I don't know what Neal has planned for this, by the way. This is Comrade Boy Scout Pro Rampant Immigration Neal here. I don't know. I'm curious to hear this.
Yeah. And then I'm glad everyone likes you chirping me. I think that's probably one of the strongest things that we have on here. You also want to go over some stuff regarding businesses and business in Canada because you had some interesting stats. And I think that also relates to why immigration is extremely important. But before all of that, because I think a good majority of the listeners are involved in the rental market or are trying to get into it, are heavily monitoring it, I want to touch on what we're seeing in the marketplace right now because I'm getting this call multiple times a day. And I think it is a very big change from what we've been used to over the last 5 years. We're also experiencing this on the real estate sales side. So if any of you are agents, you're probably feeling this. But let's talk about the rental market.
Yeah.
For a lot of years, we all know there was not enough units for the amount of people that were looking. And so you would post an ad and you would get 1,000 replies and you could literally just keep increasing the price and you'd still just get a ton of replies. And everyone was inundated and couldn't keep up. And it was the worst thing ever. Well, it was great for getting the unit rented, but it was overwhelming. Now, as time's gone on, it started to slow down a little bit. So for the last maybe 3 to 4 months, it was like, okay, you would get maybe 20 replies. Still rent pretty much instantaneously. You keep filling them up. Everything's pretty good. In the last 4 weeks, it's gone to maybe 10 to 15 replies. And people are more discerning. Depends on your pricing.
I'll push back on this a little bit. I posted this place, I will say, I think I posted it 72 hours ago. I've gotten, actually just even how many, since midnight last night, I've gotten 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 replies. But still, that is markedly down.
That would have been 40.
So in the 3 days I've had this property up, I've probably gotten, around 30 to 40 inquiries, but that would be down from what would have been about 110 probably in 3 days initially. And then certainly the rent amount that I'm charging, there was a period of time where you could borderline raise the rent about $25 every quarter, maybe even more, maybe $50 every quarter, right? So a unit that might have been $1,600 in Q1 was $1,700 by Q4. That has stopped. I'm renting these for the same price I rented them for 6 months ago, which is probably almost the same price, if not the same price I rented them for a year ago.
Yep.
It's still great, but the rent's not going up anymore. I'm not pushing it there.
And I mean, I had a call this morning. A fellow had 5 units that he dropped the rent on, $100 each of them get rented. So now he's renting for $100 less than he was getting.
How's he going to handle that with his existing tenants when they come up for renewal? Have you had that conversation?
I haven't had that conversation. And I mean, obviously the hope I think is that it stays private, but realistically it's going to get out there what the market rent is on the units. So some of them you probably just won't hit with an increase and hope to God that they don't leave, or maybe you start offering a bit of a discount. But I think it's really interesting because you also see ads, or not ads, but you get posts talking about how, and we talked about this maybe 2-3 episodes ago, and they were like, the rental market's surging, pricing's surging. And I was like,
not the case.
I'm on the ground, the rates are not surging. What's happening is you're having a surging of all the units that are not rented, which are expensive, are staying on the marketplace, which is causing the average price for listings to spike. And so now we're feeling that a lot more, even in student housing. So I have student housing operators with the cuts on immigration and foreign students. student housing went empty for the first time in a lot of years.
And they're being a bit more discerning.
People have empty units. And so then what's happening is tenants are being more discerning. Now, everyone knows I love my doom and gloom, and I'm not here to say that the market's falling off a cliff. But it actually has fallen off a cliff, in my opinion, just in the amount of volume. But I think the couple things are, I feel like all of us must have been thinking it. I know I was. Like, some of the rents that we were getting in these suburban areas or non-extremely core markets on somewhat renovated product were out of sight. Like, they were insane. And so that's coming to light. And so, like, if you budgeted to have these psychotic rents, like, that's just not realistic, right? You're not going to be able to run expecting those rents. So as long as you ran understanding what a realized normal rent is, and I'll say, like, I'm a prime example. So my product is old, low-rise, wood frame product. We did nice renos, and like, I would say that I think they're probably worth $1,800 a month, maybe $1,700 a month. And right now they're going for $1,995 to $2,100.
Mm-hmm.
That was overkill. Like, that's going to now come back to $1,750.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's where it lands and needs to be, because you're also going to have a ton of new product that's coming on downtown and in more core locations and more not sought after locations, but more convenient locations for people that are going to be a better price. And that's the other thing. Now you're seeing the growth in, like, traffic. Before, people were like, yeah, whatever, I'll live anywhere. It's only 15 minutes everywhere in the city. Now they're like, yeah, I'll pay the extra $100 a month to live maybe downtown or live closer to Burnside or whatever it is, wherever I go to work, because I don't really want to spend 40 minutes every day each way commuting, right? Now, the one point I want to make, and I think you and I, we did talk about this before, but housing, and because how did it happen so fast? I think that's the part that everyone was like, it's not going to happen overnight. We're still short 300,000 units. That's what everyone would scream. It's like any other commodity. Every month we'd have 10,000 new people and we'd have 8,000 new units. These aren't actual numbers. These are just example numbers. So we were always short 2,000, right? So it always had this upward pressure. But you weren't just seeing thousands of people pile up on the streets. So ultimately, these people are finding places to live, and we're squeezing in extra units or extra people in the units to make it work. And so really, we only ended up with maybe 1% of that was actually ended up on the streets. And so that was not this insane amount of buildup that they're saying was needed. The second they cut the immigration down, and the production of units continued or even increased, like I feel like in our city it has, that's swapped instantaneously. And the second that you have, let's say, 10,000 units come on market one month and only need 7,000, you are going to immediately feel that. That will happen over the course of 60 days. And so we're facing that right now. In the last 60 days, it has swung around completely.
I think also...
But is it going to be just a complete death of it? No. But it's just, again...
It's flat.
It's flat, and you need to expect real rents, not these insanely inflated ones.
The other thing, and this is what I found, again, I'm just kind of using mine as anecdotally because I've turned over a lot of units lately, like a lot.
Yeah.
I've turned over like 5 units in one 15-unit building, right? Like, that's a lot.
Yep.
So the rents aren't going up. And I went back and I kind of checked that. I think I've actually probably about 40 or 50 inquiries since I put the ad up. And realistically, I've offered applications to probably 30 of the 50.
Yeah.
Right. And then of the applications that have been offered, maybe I think about 12 to 14 completed it. I only invited 4 people out. And of the I invited 5 people out. Of the 5 people out, one person already said, hey, sorry, I'm good. Don't need it. So I've got 4 people for 2 units, which is still good. But like, it's very possible that of those 4, one doesn't like it. One already finds a place between now and when I show it to them this weekend. And then another person flakes or another person I don't like. So that would be the first time in years having gone through a marketing cycle and not being able to fill the units. And I'm already in a situation where one of the units is going to be vacant for a month, right? So all this stuff, like, people would run their little numbers and they put upward projections on the rents. And what would they put for vacancy? If they were running their own numbers. We know the banks...
1, 2?
People were putting in 0 in some cases.
True.
People are like, 0 vacancy. Never vacant. Are you kidding me? 0 vacancy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're good at math.
Mm-hmm.
15 units, 12 months. How many months is that total? 15 times 12.
180. 180.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So if you lose even just like through the course of a year, 4 months, right? Like, that's 2%, 2.5% vacancy.
2.25%, yeah.
Right? So... you have to start putting these numbers in there because it is real money that's lost. I'm going to lose 2 months there. And I know I lost 1 month in the last unit that turned over and the person stiffed me on the last month's rent. So now I've lost 4 months of rent in that building over a 3-month span. Like at $1,500, like that's $6,000. Like this is not insignificant.
Well, and consider that most of these buildings were looking at like a 5% return. And if you were doing a 5% return with 0% vacancy, and now you put 2.5% vacancy in there, you're now making 2.5%.
Yeah.
Because it's directly on your bottom line.
And like I haven't even gone back through my whole year and be like, oh, well, just in these last couple months, I have lost 4 months of occupancy on that building, which we said is 2.5% vacancy, give or take. So if I don't lose another month and I have to go back and see if I missed any months, like I'm renting that building now at 3% conservatively vacancy, which we didn't have. And that it stands to reason that might get worse. But, it just was like, all right, well, now I need to know what my rental market is. I've been very fortunate, though. I will say this, by sheer coincidence, the units that are turning over are people that are lower rents.
I had some lower rent ones turn over. And that's the other opportunity that I'm seeing. My client that called me this morning made that point. With this market then becoming a bit more liquid, people will start to move around because they're going to see that there's options. Like, I'm not going to go here and get ramsacked, or they're going to find other units that are at reasonable price points. People need to get them filled in. And so you might get some units that are at lower price point. I had two lower price point ones that emptied out as well. I'm like, what the hell? You guys have been, they were literally like $1,000 under market. I'm like,
and some of it is dumb luck too, right? Some of it's just like the natural trajectory of people's lives. Like they were in the unit for 4 years, which means they are under market. And then after 4 years, they are moving somewhere for their life, for their personal reasons, for their work, whatever. So I'm looking at these two units like, man, I hate that I have to rent these, but I'm going to literally get $1,000 more a month. However, I'm going to lose at least 2 months doing it, plus some cost to paint and spruce them up. So I'm going to be out $3,000, but then I'm going to make $1,000 more. Like, so my get back is going to be, 3 to 4 months to get that money back. But it is a change. And I think it's noteworthy, and people need to stop running stuff at 0% vacancy. They need to stop running things at inflated rental numbers because they're just not going to get it. And even if you can get the appraisal and juice it and you can get the refi, it may not be the best thing to do.
100%.
Yeah.
Hold your refis. Actually, don't, because we got to keep this market moving.
Refi and buy. Interestingly, CMHC is getting rid of that rule where if you refi with CMHC, you had to reinvest the money. Well, you don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, the equity takeout clause.
Yeah.
That's what saved a bunch of people because they couldn't pay out privates for a bit there.
Well, that too, but also like you had to reinvest that money.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're making that a requirement anymore. I think you, on your refi, I think you can take it out.
I think you're,
Jody's going to text us as soon as he hears that. Be like, actually, but I think there is some change in that.
Yeah, 100%. Marital debate. You didn't go.
Yeah. I wanted to. I just was already booked.
No, it's fine.
But you didn't.
Making grilled cheese. I know. I called you as I walked in there.
I was stuffing grilled cheeses in my pockets.
Yeah. But interesting. I mean, I feel like we all already know, I think, who's taking it.
You think Andy Filmer's going to win?
Yeah. Nothing against Pam or Way, but
or the other 22 people running.
Yeah. I mean, just based on polls, like he's so far ahead, it doesn't really seem to have much weight. But all I'm going to say is my takeaway from it, because realistically, it's all so political and it's so annoying.
And it's politics after all.
I know, but it's so.
I can't believe this campaign got so political.
But it's no offense, but like nothing against Halifax, but it's like this is a city of size where like you can actually do cool things. I honestly, I think Tim Houston's doing a reasonable job of showing that. Like they're making changes, they're doing certain stuff. Like that you can make moves here. Like it's not like it's such a big, and that's what I mean by it's political in the sense like it's overly political for the size of city that we're dealing with, in my opinion, which is maybe naive or a bit stupid to say, but like I feel like they're at a size where you can actually make an impact with your council and then actually make changes within the city and be semi-timely with them. Like we're just not that big.
Yeah.
But they all just say the same stuff that everyone says everywhere. And it's like, man, we can easily look at like our city's small. You can look at it and just see plain and simple. Like there's only so many, like there's only 2 or 3 highways that feed into the entire city. We know where we need to put in the transit locations. Like it's not like we have like 39 highways and we only have a budget for this. And like, so I don't know, just listening to them, it's the same old stuff of like, and the questions also are like, bike lanes? What are you doing with taxes? And I'm like, what? Like, I mean, what? None of them can do anything within 4 years that's going to make any meaningful impact on those on the taxes. And then the bike lanes, like it's kind of a ridiculous thing where it's like, do I think there should be bike lanes? Yes, but does it need to be the way that they're being done and so massive? Probably not. So anyways, my summary on the whole thing is, Andy's going to win. He seems reasonable. I hope he can make some changes and kind of keep up with it, because I honestly do think our city's making changes in the right direction. Another thing I'll comment on today is you ever been to the outpatient center in Bears Lake that they built?
No, but I've seen it. But
man, I was like, damn, son, let's
nice.
go, city. This beautiful building, parking, the whole works. You show up. I was in and out in like 30 minutes for an MRI, like bang on. So good. The building inside was, I mean, it's brand new, but gorgeous, super well laid out, organized. I'm sure I'll get over capacity and be a big nightmare, but like, it was great. And everything worked out really well. I was like, this actually, I can see this becoming like, it's a good way to ease the burden off downtown, especially while they're building that giant reno. So, and that's the other thing, like they're doing the giant reno, which is funny because they were talking about that, how everyone freaked out because the whole peninsula gridlocked when they had some streets shut down for the reno at the QE2.
Well, also people were
It's like,
complaining about
how are we
it being
supposed to
out
fix
there.
these things if we can't build it?
Yeah, and people were complaining about it being out there. It's like, that's just so, selfish and short-sighted. Like, you think people don't live out there? Newsflash, man. People live out there, and there's going to be thousands and thousands of more very soon living out that way.
The 80% of the city that doesn't live around the one on Roby Street would literally be freaking out the whole time they had to get to Roby Street.
Oh,
like, I watched
100%.
my mom battle her way downtown, then not know where the hell to park or pay a ton of money for parking. But even parking, all the things are full.
Yeah.
So she'd be like 8 blocks over, bad hip, hobbling her way into Roby. Like, it was just a nightmare the whole way through. Whereas, like, I literally called her as I walked. I was like, you need to book all of your appointments at Bears Lake. Because you can come here, you can go to Tim's, you can pull up, you can park, walk in. It's clean, it's tidy, it's simple, and you're out the door.
Well, it's funny. Like, we, for some reason, our public sector institutions, like, and I'm thinking like, even things like, do you remember having to go downtown to get your passport done?
Yeah.
Like,
I did, yeah, Maritime Center.
Like, and, our government buildings, but also to some degree, our universities, like, they are so insistent on being downtown, where it's like anything.
University should be downtown.
Any private sector business, which those should be run like, it's like, no, we're going out to the burbs, man. We're going out to these big industrial parks where land is dirt cheap.
Yep.
We can build, how we want. We can have parking. We're on major accessibility. Like,
you see that in the newer American cities.
Totally.
Like the schools are outside the city and they build their own communities around them.
Can you imagine if you were, and I know this isn't how like emergency services work per se, but like if you say got in, say you needed an ambulance and you were in Fairview.
Yeah.
Would you rather that ambulance had to, in rush hour traffic, get down to the downtown hospital or take you out to Bears Lake? Newsflash, man, Bears Lake is going to be quicker.
Yeah.
Right. So we have this idea. It seems to be really pervasive, but like government buildings should be downtown. It's like, why? It's terrible. It's way more expensive. They're way older buildings. They're way less functional. Put them out in the burbs, man. I even thought, the NASCAD people won't like this. When NASCAD, like
Pier 21,
I feel like NASCAD,
you're attacking everybody right now.
They should have just done a land swap, made all this money because they didn't have a bunch of money at the time. Like land swap their properties downtown and just build like a beautiful state of the art facility outside of town. But anyway, now they're here that. That's a big digression.
All right, give me some of your numbers. You got a sheet there full of numbers. I see percentages and stuff.
Well, I wanted to talk, and this ties into a little bit of what we're talking about, but also my random story about my dad's business and the beavers. So in June, 1 in 20, and I'm not a big math guy, but I know that's 5%. 1 in
Good
20 businesses in Canada closed in June, according to
just
StatCan.
in the 1 month?
In June, 1 in 20, 5% of Canadian businesses closed in the month of June. That is the most since the pandemic, and it equates to, how many businesses do you think that works out to?
Oh, God, I should know this because I rambled about how many businesses we have here. It's, 1 sec.
Don't feel a whole lot of pressure. It's okay if you don't get it.
150,000?
No, 46,354. 46,354 businesses closed in the month of June, which, again, was the highest since the pandemic. And remember in the pandemic, like, people were closing businesses because they're like, screw this. Like, there's nothing on. We got to shutter this business. We got to close. Well, last month was the highest since then. What two sectors do you think were most affected in there?
Restaurants?
No, surprisingly, not restaurants, but I bet they're up there. The obvious one's probably retail. Retail's closing down. Consumers aren't spending a whole lot.
But is it already happening? Apparently it is.
Apparently happening in June.
So retail, and then what's the other one? Construction?
Construction.
I saw that coming, yeah.
Yeah.
We're the only city that seems to be still pumping.
So the one thing we know we need more of is more construction.
Yep, they're killing that.
And that is not happening. Construction companies and retail were leading the most affected businesses. So you would think that with all this new immigration, the things that would survive would be like, all right, well, we need development, we need houses, so construction should be doing well. It's not. And you think retail
more
would
products.
be, you think retail would be holding on, but they're not. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. Like, businesses also open regularly. You know this. You're a business owner. Business is shuttered. New business is open.
Yep.
The new openings in June were at 4.2%, which is the weakest in more than 3 years. So again, the weakest since the post-pandemic reopening.
Yep.
Right? After pandemic, people reopened. The number of businesses that opened was 4.2%. So we're effectively getting a loss of 1% of the entire Canadian business pool being
huge.
lost. It's huge.
That's massive.
While we grow in the number of people. So one, the people that are coming here evidently aren't starting businesses en masse, which is to make sense because you can't just open a business in one day.
Show up and open a business.
But even that influx of new people is not enough to maintain the businesses that are here. And it doesn't bode well for unemployment numbers. If I'm looking at that, right, my next question is, well, when are the StatCan numbers on unemployment going to come out? Because they're not going to be good, right? They can't be good. Unemployment has to go up again. And unemployment's been steadily rising now for months.
I wonder how many of these just ghost businesses that were just kind of floating along, not doing a whole hell of a lot.
I don't know, but I mean, they employed some people, and even that, you shutter those kind of businesses when you're man, it's literally not worth the cost to pay the registry fee of operating this business, right? So it's, yeah. I mean, again, you're a business owner. That's got to be an ominous figure.
No, I'm not. It is. It's very ominous. And I mean, finally, doom and gloom Neal is starting to come to light in the actual numbers on the paper. I guess I'm not surprised by it, but I'm just trying to understand why specifically it's more retail and construction. I guess construction's just stalled up in so many places. And I think we're going to have the same stall up happen here pretty soon, that those companies, there's a lot of companies that were formed during this process that now don't have the ability because there's not the overflow to for all of them to eat. Yeah. So then you have the more elder businesses that have been around that are more established and have the financial resources to get through some of these periods. Because talking to some bigger business owners, they're we're not doing great, but
we can stomach it.
We can stomach it. Well, they're we have to stomach it. We're 25 years into this. You think we're just going to shut down because we're about to have a bad couple of years?
Right.
Right? That's part of the game.
Whereas John's Roofing can be you know what? I'm shutting it down.
If he just opened again in 2021.
Work for a crew, and then I'll open back up in 2026 if it comes back around.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to have a lot of that movement where it moves into the bigger players. Retail is interesting to me. I'd be curious to know if there's a certain type of retail that's worse than others. But in general, same thing. I feel there's a million little stores. There's also just a ton of little mom and pop shops where they start their own little brands and this and that, these breweries and stuff, all these kind of things where it's we do this, and it's okay, it costs a little bit more, but you're buying local and blah, 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 blah. Ain't nobody got any money left, so they're not buying local. They're going back to Walmart.
Yeah.
Right?
And when money is good, people are adventure seeking with their money. You know what I mean? Hey, I got some money, I'm going to try artisanal bookmaking. There's this new pop-up, and I'm going to people aren't trying to do that when money's a little tighter. Artisanal bookmaking?
I know. I'm trying to wonder. I'm how'd you come with that one? Kind of interested though. Might have to check it out.
Obviously, I mean, consumer spending dropping off is going to be the number one thing affecting retail. But you know what I think is the other silent killer? And we talked about this a little bit on the episode with Elliot there about triple net leases, right?
Oh, yeah.
So imagine you're there, you're running this business, you're in a storefront. So you're in retail, you're in a storefront, you're paying a triple net lease. That means, for those of you who aren't totally familiar with triple net leases, it means you pay a proportional share of all the costs associated with the building, not just your rent, but a proportional share of the insurance on the building, which has gone through the roof, all the utilities on the building, which has gone through the roof, the repair of the building, which has gone through the roof,
and the tax,
and the property tax, which has gone through the roof. So all of those get directly passed on to the tenant. And you might be able to stomach that for a year. You might be able to stomach that for 2 years. But then you get to a point where consumer spending drops off and your expenses have literally never been higher, and not by a small amount. Even just a typical homeowner, check how much your insurance has gone up, check how much your property tax has gone up, check how much your utilities have gone up, and then, look into how much, say, snow removal, landscaping, garbage removal, all this stuff has gone through the roof. I think a lot of tenant retail spaces are just going to say, I can't do it. That's my breaking point right there. We hit it. I'm done. And so their leases come up for renewal. What are they doing right now? Realistically, right? They're you know what? No, it makes more sense for me to shutter this than to deal with this new lease.
The thing I don't understand, at least locally, is I feel the commercial rates never come down to deal with it. There's so many spaces that'll just sit empty for years and years and years. And at some point,
to sit those suckers empty.
And I'm like, what do you just offset it with the residential rents then? Like you just suck the living lights of them. Like it's like I don't get it.
Yeah, I wonder if that has something to do with like if they are publicly traded REITs, like how that looks on the book.
Quality of tenants, and then the
even like your
rents.
appraisal, like if you can do a market rent for a vacant space as opposed to an actual, like it might actually, you know what I mean? Like
I
the
totally know what you
shareholder value,
mean.
like yeah. Anyway, I just thought that was pretty horrific news. Transitioning from now there because it's going to blend into what we talked about. Actually, I'm going to do that last. But my other thing is in Q1 or I guess it was Q2 of this year, real estate investors comprised 30.4% of all buys. Actually, no, that's year to date, 2024.
I feel like is that lower or higher than what it was?
Higher. It's higher.
So it's optimistic people that are seeing like deals in the market that they feel like are worthwhile buying. I think there's also still a ton of people that are still bullish. I
think there's also maybe a case of like...
I think a lot of that was earlier in the year. Like I think that's slowing down now.
Okay.
But well, maybe not. Like I have a lot of investors that have been sitting around waiting, and they're just like, all right, like, oh, you're willing to negotiate now? Okay, let's have that conversation.
I have a dude that hasn't even looked at real estate in probably 3 years.
And he's coming out of the woodwork.
Like, lowball these people, lowball those people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So these investors, if they smell a little blood in the water, and then when you get the overall transactions being done, like investors invest.
Yeah.
Right? Market up, market down. They tend to just buy on the dips.
Yeah.
Right? So, but the number of transactions is down. So I think their percentage is being artificially, well, not artificially, but like the numbers just move the percentage up because they're going to buy their X number of properties a year, regardless of the market.
Yeah.
But if traditional owner occupied people are buying less, then it's a higher share. But for context, I think if you go back to 2014, it was somewhere around like kind of 18 to low to mid 20s was sort of that typical range of investor buying. It also adds some level of support to this idea that investors are screwing the marketplace up by artificially creating what could be perceived as a housing shortage. When it's like, well, maybe if you guys stopped buying 30% of the houses, there wouldn't be a shortage.
Yeah.
Plus over there, just cut that.
I'm just thinking in my head, I'm like, yeah, I guess. I don't know. I mean, if they're not like, it's an open market, so like they're buying stuff that the other person could buy.
Yeah.
And like, we're just talking about how there's a cap on the rents. So, I mean, if they're buying stuff and it doesn't make sense, very quickly it's going to come back to market, right? And so the market's going to dictate what it really is worth. And a lot of these properties that we've talked about for a long time, and especially right now, the numbers don't really make any sense. So, there's people that are willing to take the risk and or put out the cash. So I don't know. I hate that like pointing the finger thing of like investors are what screws it up.
Well, I also couldn't find a figure on this, but I would love to know it. What percentage of the sellers were investors this year?
That's the thing. So they're just trading hands back and forth. Like,
yeah. My last thing before we get into your topic, but this is a logical transition. So the non-permanent residents slowed in Q2 of 2024. Non-permanent residents are your work visas, your study permits, your refugees. Q2 was down 23% from Q1 and overall 48% from last year. We're still at about 120,000 people per quarter. So if you take that over the course of the year, that's 480,000 people, give or take, which is roughly the size of Halifax. So we're still bringing in to the country about the population of Halifax every single year. But that being down, conservatively 50% since last year. What are your thoughts on that, Neal? And it's all yours to segue into your agenda here.
I'm supposed to talk now, aren't I? Okay, look, seriously, this is why I want to talk about immigration. To all the stats you just gave out, there is a huge boil over, and I think everyone that listens to this has a similar sentiment, but it seems to be in the public that the general idea is that the huge immigration numbers just screw everything up and ruin everything, and congestion and house prices and rent prices and availability of retail products, and it just causes all these issues and pains.
It's a popular talking point right now for sure, and I'm sure we
we also have in all levels of politics right now. It's a huge point.
Yeah.
Now, on the same note to what Chandler just said, we've noticed that non-permanents are getting cut really fast, and I don't know if they're getting cut or people are losing interest in coming here.
Both,
right? Because they're coming here and they're like, well, everyone dislikes us, and it's expensive, and we can't get jobs, and on and on and on. So there's a lot of talk in the marketplace of we need to continue with that, of cutting things back, slowing down the immigration, and trying to catch up as a country. But then, if you look at the stats that Chandler just went over, I think it'll start to resonate why it's important that you don't just take your foot off the gas. And we talked about this before when rates started going up, is I don't know that that's the bigger lever that we need to be concerned about, because I think we're more hinged on the immigration lever than we are on the rates. And I think we're going to see that here now as they pull back on the immigration.
So what do you think it's going to do?
Well, so we're already seeing what it's going to do. right? So there's the first piece, which is what we just talked about, which on housing, obviously, there's a certain amount of units are being built every month. There's a certain amount of people coming in every month. Like any other commodity. If you have more people buying it than there is offering it, you're going to have this push up in prices, which is what we had happen. Now, when things have slowed down, it's going quite the opposite and very quickly. The other problem that we're going to face is the businesses that you talked about. They're not going to get the support that they need to either sell the products that they want to sell or in the construction industry be able to keep building these units because all these investors that have all these big buildings or whatever, they're going to start freezing up their projects. Mm-hmm. Toronto's a prime example. Like they have all these frozen projects, which is where I bet you most of those construction companies shut down because they just very quickly ran out of contracts. The bigger thing for me that I wanted to touch on was the difficulty, like the thing that bothers me with shutting this down and like everyone's screaming this. I think what they're not thinking about is, okay, so we had a run on for the last couple of years. There are a ton of new entrants to the market, myself included, a ton of younger people that are trying to open a new business because finally there was enough business in all the sectors that, okay,
can support a new,
AMAC, Black & McDonald can't physically complete every plumbing contract. Mm-hmm. This contractor can't do all this work. This retailer can't keep up with this sales demand.
Right.
All these different people, the main big players that are extremely wealthy and or have very large companies, can't keep up with the amount of demands out there. So it provided an opportunity for new people to get into the marketplace and get established. The difficulty is we only had a couple of years to do that. And so you can't really get established in a short time frame like that. And so when then you pull it back like this, a lot of new people that are in the marketplace now are going to get squashed. Those 5% of businesses that shut down, those aren't businesses that are 20 plus years old. They're just not. Right? And so those people continue to win. They will then, they'll actually come out of this ahead because what's going to happen is all the little companies that are sucking up some of their business, all the little mosquitoes that are bugging them, are all going to get zapped out again.
They're going to absorb them.
And they're going to absorb them. They're going to get gear on discounted prices. Labor rates will go down because they can pick up all sorts of people wherever they want. It's a huge win for them. They can get every single contract. They have way less competition in the market. So I'm like, you cut back immigrations. It's all good in the hood. But all that ends up benefiting is the ones that are already established, right? And I know there's pain and discomfort in this growth, but that's like growth is part of like a successful economy. And for the new groups of people to be able to succeed, you need that to be there. And then you need to have confidence in that where like it's going to sustain. Like people from outside the country or even within the country aren't going to want to invest in businesses and like, well, really the economy if they're not confident that it's going to sustain like that. Like, well, they're having a 4-year run, but every time they do this, everyone cries and then they pull it back the tap and then they overcorrect and screw it. So it's like sometimes you need to just power through this and actually start making moves. And like I think again, I actually am impressed with how the city's handling it here. Like they started making moves pretty quickly. They're like, all right, and we're gonna start rinsing like out we're gonna get all new counselors, we're gonna get new people in all the positions, and like they're slapping down. Like I said, this outpatient center was great. They're making the additions on the hospital like very quickly. They're like, we need more nurses. Okay, we're gonna put a huge allocation of money there. Paramedics aren't making enough money, so we just quickly put more money on them. Like they're making the moves as quickly as they can, and mistakes are going to happen. Not every move is going to be perfect, but they were actually like going after it, and it was providing this opportunity where like people were servicing the new nurse contracts, people were servicing all these new vehicles that needed to be outfitted for the health center. Like there was so much stuff going on, and now when you strip all that back, the only people that are going to survive are like the multinational brands. The guys who's got the big truck shop up the street here, they're multinational. They're going to be fine. The new one that started down here, the young guy that's been killing it, he's toast. Like there's no chance.
It's very reminiscent of all the stuff in COVID. And we talked about this at the time, going way back to like COVID and post-COVID days and all this stuff. Like during recessionary times,
Walmart's going to do fucking awesome.
Exactly. The big places that can stomach it are going to absorb their competition, and then they're going to come out of it like with another leg up. Like these periods of time when there's blood in the streets, like money flows upward. It doesn't, like you'll get the occasional startup who like in a bad situation, through sheer innovation and a little bit of luck, like explodes something because it feeds a need at a certain time. But for the most part, like the liquid survive these times. And when you are liquid and there are deals to be had, you have the opportunity to mass accumulate assets and then enjoy the next run up. And I think, I think to your point, like that is going to happen. I think the other thing is, I think in hindsight, and we're in it right now, so it's hard. It's hard. In hindsight, we will have to figure out, was the sheer volume of people the problem, or was it the skills of the people and the vetting of the people the problem. And I mean, did we ensure that people were coming to fill the industry needs that we wanted?
Yeah.
Did we ensure that the people were coming with the money and the jobs that they said they had, or with the intents to study that they said they had? I don't think it's a case where it was the wrong decision for all the reasons you mentioned. And for just the look at the track record on immigration, generally speaking, it's been phenomenal for our country. I think we just didn't do a good enough job at it. And we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater and be like, well, slam on the brakes, screw immigration, it didn't work. It's like, well, it worked for a long time. We got it a little bit wrong in this particular case.
We just did it too short. Even the selection of the type of people, that will do its natural course. If you think about it, like I know so many people in the last 6 months that have been trying to start new businesses that'll feed the growth of the sectors that we've been having. I even still have people right now that are like, I want to start this, I want to start that, because they're seeing all this growth and they know people who own a business that's just killing it. At some point, like a prime one that I heard a bunch of from friends in the developer community, they're like, concrete forming was out of sight.
Yeah.
I think in the last 12 months in Halifax, like 5 companies or 6 companies have opened now doing concrete forming.
Nice.
The marketplace will correct itself. And ultimately, if those concrete forming people cannot get the skilled labor and it gets to the point where they're offering $70 an hour, I'll tell you right now, the people that can do it or are going to learn to do it are going to go and do it. Some dude's not going to be like, you know what, I'm just going to keep, even though I'm like not necessarily formally a concrete guy, I'm just going to keep like working at the painting store or being a painter at $25 an hour when I can literally do this job here.
Totally.
For $70 an hour, and I'm going to learn to fill in that position, and then I will become. I'll work that for the next 5 or 10 years because it's good, and then at that point, I'm now experienced in that industry, and will continue with it. But now the problem is, all of these things are just going to get slapped down. They're going to start shutting them down, and then that right when they're like, I feel like we're right at that period where people are like, oh, I'm going to open that business, I'm gonna do this, or I'm going to make that move into that industry, and then they hit the brakes on it, and it's like, man, we were just getting started.
The one counter argument I'll make to that is, I think this comes back a little bit to the point of, if more insight and diligence was put into the skills that people were coming here with.
I agree. They should have been doing that.
And the training we were going to offer them.
Yeah.
Then we wouldn't have this problem. Because what you're saying is like, if we just give it a couple years, then the market will do its thing. And I don't disagree with you, but it's a long couple years to have a bunch of people who sadly can't find a place to live, can't find jobs that match their skill set, and aren't adding the human capital that we need to keep the economy where we're hopefully going to have it. So I think there was an error made, but I agree to your point.
It will correct. It will correct. Even I know so many companies where the company owner would reach out and say, hey, man, I need to buy some housing that I'm going to put my people in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so then people are like, well, I can't find housing. This guy's offering housing in a job. Like, I'm going to go there.
Right.
And I'm going to learn that skill and become a part of that trade or whatever business or industry that is.
Yeah.
Because again, a lot of people were coming, and once you've moved completely across the world, you're probably a little bit more fluid on what industry you're going to end up in.
Totally.
You may have been something here or something there. Now you're completely something different once you got here, right?
Yeah. But instead it was like, come here, get a fake diploma, don't go to class, and then just get any job. It should have been like, no, you show up here and like day one, good news. We've got...
Should have been just pumping them through NSCC.
Exactly. We got NSC, we got a place for you to live. Like, it could have been the greatest boon of our generation, but I think it was fumbled. But again, what you're saying is like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, which I agree with. I think it needs refinement and improvement. Because again, the what's being thrown around is like, well, they're taking all the housing and this, that, and the other thing. And like, I don't think that's a fair criticism.
No.
Though it has caused massive problems. Like, I was thinking about this the other day. If someone like pushed me on why I am not going to vote for Trudeau, it would be like, because I think it's been a complete fumbling of what people would say is most important to them, which would be inflation. Not entirely his fault. Like, every country in the world has inflation, so you can't solely blame it on our federal liberals, right? But like, we haven't been a leader in that space. But our hospital situation is atrocious, right? Our housing situation is atrocious, and I know that's an issue worldwide, but that's still no excuse. We've done a bad job, and we bumbled the immigration. Whether or not it was a good idea, bad idea, like, I think it was a good idea, but we bumbled it, right? So that's why I wouldn't.
It was a series of events that killed it, because now it's like, okay, they came out and they upzoned every single city so aggressively. Like, now there's a ton of upzoned land. There's 1 million projects available. Like, they've now done it, but it's like, oh, it's too late because we spent 2 years in pain for them to do it. And then healthcare money's coming out like crazy all over the place. Like, every healthcare industry in every city is popping off now. Like, they're all building huge additions. Like, damn, man, when you open the immigration tab, you should have started that day one. Like, it should have gone hand in hand. But even in the correction point, I'm like, even with the correction, like, just hold true to the course. Like,
it's hard, and this is the nature of 4-year terms and politics in general. It's also why it's so hard to run and win as an incumbent. Like, this is going to be the challenge to the Harris campaign, because you can say, I've got the greatest plan ever. And the easy clapback is like, well, why didn't you do it for the last 4 years? Right? And the Liberals now have had 10 years. And so, like, they can say, we got all these great plans. It's like, well, the easy criticism is, why didn't you do them 3 years ago? Maybe we wouldn't have been in this mess, right? Like, and that is a hard thing for anyone to overcome. And that's why, recent history, especially, it's a revolving door of who's in power, Yeah. Anyway,
politics are funny. It's an interesting way, like, how it keeps, like, the thing I think that always gets forgotten about is, like, you got to look at it from a high level political standpoint of, like, controlling a population. Not controlling. I shouldn't use it because people get fired up with that, but basically operating your population, right? Like, and guiding them on what, as a country, the kind of the mandate is and what needs to be done, and how you want to be perceived on a global scale, and how you want the future to look for the country, or how that party wants the future to look for the country.
And sadly, that being counterbalanced with trying to keep your job. And, how much can you really turn the economy of a country in 3.5 years?
No.
Not much.
Yeah.
Right? And so it is a very difficult task. And then you get into these things where it's like, gosh, if I can just get another term, I get a pension. And that's human nature, man. I don't care what anyone says. I cannot be convinced that doesn't have a large deal to do with, why our election is being postponed. I believe it adamantly that it's people want to reach a certain date where then they can collect their pension. And I get that. Just in the same way that I get it's not entirely fair to hold at least the fiscal policy of a government. I don't think you can look at that in 3 and 4 year increments, because you don't get the data back. You don't know. Right. So it's so easy to critique like what was done in 2020. And I fall guilty to this. Like, they totally screwed that up, blah, blah, blah. It was a very unique circumstance. And we're only now in 2024 fully grappling with, well, what did that look like? What did that cause? Because again, I think we overshot on rates, and, we dropped them too low. By that I mean, and then anyway, it's very difficult. It's an unenviable task to try to get things accomplished in a 4-year period.
One thing I want to put out there, too, is I agree with you on that, is I don't know if anyone listening would think this, but maybe. It's like, if you do if you're, well, for the people who run their business well, they should be able to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think that mindset's definitely going to be out there to some extent.
Yeah, that's even unfair to some degree.
Well, and that's my point, is I don't agree with that. Right?
Well, this is what we hear about landlords all the time, was like, oh my gosh, like, I have to raise rent because otherwise, I can't afford the building. People go, well, that's showbiz, baby. You shouldn't have bought it if it was a bad investment. If you couldn't stomach it, it's like, well, man, no one says that to the mom and pop, business that closes down the road, right? Like, it is an unfair thing sometimes.
When every single material that you utilize to create whatever product you make, whether it's a restaurant, and then everyone, like, if you're a restaurant, you could be running the best restaurant right now, but everyone, like, man, I used to be able to come here because a pizza was $14. Now it's $22. I can't afford that as frequently. So I'll come once a month instead of once every 2 weeks. And he's like, I was just making capacity when you were coming once every 2 weeks. Yeah. Now my food cost is up. And like you said, the rent cost, all these things are up. I run a great shop. I've never messed around. I think there's a misconception that anyone who runs a business is just making so much damn money. I'm like, most of these businesses make little to no money. These people bust their ass. And then, so when there's a pullback like this, you're screwed. And if you're anywhere in the startup process, you're hooped.
And here are the options. It's like, you can either have the
You don't have equity built up in 5 years.
Yeah. It's either you can have the $14.99 pizza for another 3 months, because at the end of that 3 months, I'm going to have to close. Or you can have the $22.99 pizza, and I'll be in business here.
But guess I'm going to close because no one's buying it.
Hopefully some people actually still come out and support, because no one says, well, if you couldn't run your numbers better, if you couldn't run your pizza business better, you don't deserve to be in business, which is sometimes the criticism we have, for example, landlords. But
good news, everyone up just working for the government.
Don't even get me started on that. But all right, as always, guys, appreciate you listening.
Let us know your thoughts. I'd love to hear what some people have to think about immigration. And like,
I got 2 messages about the podcast today and the episode that we watched. Do us a solid, man. Put it on your social media. Don't just talk about it. Don't just message.
Tell your friends.
Be about it. Put it up there. Let people know you're listening. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Take care.
Thanks so much for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. Don't forget to subscribe. But also check us out on Instagram and TikTok. You can find all the links below. Thanks again for checking us out.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.